Is another U.S.-Russia prisoner exchange coming? Talks are reportedly underway to trade a jailed American women's NBA star for a Russian arms dealer. Brittney Griner was jailed in Russia last February after customs officials there allegedly found vape cartridges containing hash oil in her luggage. Well, here with more is Aron, chief legal analyst for Esquire Digital. Aron, thanks for being with us. So I know you've been following this story closely. What are the chances Brittney Griner will soon be released?
Thanks very much for having me. I know this is an important story for all of your viewers. In my opinion, 6 months from now, we could have the same conversation. And sadly, Brittney Griner is going to remain a political detainee in Russia. I don't think that this is going to resolve too fast.
Well, why is that?
Well, I think, without trying to sound trite about the whole thing, we've got to think about it in sports terms. You've got two sides that have a player at this point that they're looking to trade. And the way it works is they have to find an equitable trade that pleases both of them. When TASS the other day, the Russian news agency, released news that Russia was interested in having a trade with the Merchant of Death, this arms dealer that's been in U.S. detention since he was extradited from Thailand in 2008, I don't believe that the U.S. sees this as a fair trade. Remember, for Marine Trevor Reed, conversations that went on about that prisoner trade were about a year and a half long. I don't think this thing is resolving itself in a few weeks.
Okay, I want to get back to that in a moment, but Griner was taken into custody just before Russia invaded Ukraine, and they've charged her with trafficking for having cannabis residue in a vape. So is she just being used as a political pawn here? What is Putin's goal?
Well, that's exactly what it is. In fact, a lot of us thought that in the beginning, and it wasn't until the U.S. called her, quote unquote, wrongfully detained a couple of weeks ago that it really put weight behind that argument. Wrongfully detained, and then the addition of Bill Richardson, a trained hostage negotiator and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, really puts a lot of weight behind the notion that Brittney Griner is a political detainee or a political prisoner.
And they really want Victor Bout, the jailed Russian arms dealer, as you mentioned, the Merchant of Death, who may be traded for Griner. Now, he served less than half of his 25-year sentence. And you mentioned that really isn't a fair trade. A convicted Russian arms dealer for a vaping WNBA star? What's going on with that? Why does Russia want him?
Well, the issue right now is that Russia has all of the leverage here. They have Brittney Griner, who was the most famous American athlete who was playing in Russia at the time, and they took her basically preemptively because they knew they were about to invade Ukraine. So the U.S. does not have a lot of leverage at this point, and this is all working, as you said in the beginning, not just politically, but through diplomatic back channels that tend to be quite slow.
Now, Trevor Reed was exchanged in April. And how about Paul Whelan? He's still being held. He's in American jail now for 40 months on false espionage charges. If we keep making these deals, Aron, how will you ever stop Putin from detaining Americans to get what he wants?
Well, that's a very fine point, Gary. I mean, the reality is, you don't want to incentivize other countries to take your citizens when they realize that they have leverage over you. I think there's a much bigger core issue here in the Brittney Griner situation, which is why for years and years, top women's athletes in the WNBA have had to go and ply their trade in places like Russia and Turkey and China. And the reality is because the business model in that league isn't working for them.
Well, how is Griner doing now through all of this? Does she even know that there's a war going on in Ukraine and that she's being used politically in negotiations between the U.S. and Russia?
That's a great question. Now, supposedly, she does have some access at this point to the U.S. diplomatic corps, so I'm sure that she's been briefed about the facts of the situation. That doesn't change her own reality, which is that Russia, unlike the United States, does not have rule of law. So we have to separate ourselves in our own minds from expecting things in Russia with Brittney Griner to happen like they would if a Russian were detained in the United States.
Okay, we'll wait and see what happens. But as you say, it may be a little longer than we think. Aron Solomon, thank you for providing us with those insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.